Hello, friends. Welcome back to Value Vintage Cards. I'm going to dive into a couple of topics and show you three cards today. But I recently received a text from a friend in the hobby, and he asked me the question, "Do you have insurance on your collection?" And I think I've addressed this maybe once or twice in the last year plus that I've made videos, just kind of as a short comment. But yes, absolutely, I do now. I probably didn't for far too long. And I recently had the good fortune of sitting down with Alex and Mitchell and chatting about card rooms and card space and displays and design of the room and all that kind of fun stuff. I think if you're to the point of having a designated space for your collection, you're really putting some time, some thought, and probably some value into what you're doing. At that point, it's probably a good idea to check out insurance. It's not huge money, but it's not, $30 a year either. So they ask you to document what your collection looks like and, show evidence of what you have. And it's a pretty easy process, honestly. So I think it's definitely a worthwhile spend if you're considering your collection to be something of value. And that did kind of rope me into the question. We hear a lot about, dealer, investor, collector designations, and people will say, "Oh, I'm 100% this," or "I'm 80% that." And I'm going to say, dealer is probably a little more obvious, right? Either you're going to shows or selling online or actively trying to move things. And some of my friends that I would say are hardcore collectors are also kind of pseudo dealers, and that's how they feed their collecting. They buy a lot, and they sell some off, or they buy 8 of a card. I had a friend that did that. He had like 6 or 7 of a card that's pretty tough. And he's like, "I want to keep 1, maybe 2, and I'm going to move the rest of them. And it'll actually probably pay for the entire purchase if I do it strategically." I don't think that necessarily makes you a dealer, although you kind of deal for a moment. Where I think people get maybe a little, if it's sensitive or just maybe caught up in the label. Are you a collector or an investor? Um, and here's where I differentiate. I think every collector actually is an investor. And I say that because when we see something for sale that we want, if it's not a price that we think is reasonable, fair to market or what we're willing to spend, we pass on it. But you wanted it. A collector, you're purely collecting, you don't care about the value. Why not just overpay? Silly idea, right? But wouldn't that really be the purest form? People say, if my collection, the value cut in half tomorrow, I wouldn't care. I continue to invest in the stock market through the ups and downs. And when it goes up, I wish I would have bought it earlier. And when it goes down, I maybe want to hold and see if it's going to go down further or where my thoughts are. But I don't love that it goes down. I don't say like, cool, I can buy more now, because I do have faith in 30 years it'll be higher than it is today. Much like our collectibles, I have the same perspective, but I don't think it's necessarily true that you can be 100% this and 0% that. And if you are, I'd love to sell you everything I've got for double what it's worth, because you don't care about the value whatsoever. To me, that makes it kind of a crazy statement, right? I think we all want to get good value, and we all want to make selections that we think are going to at least retain the value. We can't control the market. I get the sentiment that I'm going to continue to make purchases, and yes, if everything went down in value right now, maybe there's a certain era of card or a certain player or a certain several sets that maybe are a little bit less expensive than they were a year or two ago. Sure, dive in. And I'm not selling mine as they drop by 10% in price. I get that. I totally get that. But I think to separate those two ideas completely and say I am all in this bucket, not in that bucket, is a little bit on the interesting side. So give some thought to that. I think that would be actually a fun topic. Maybe I need to reach out to Jason and a couple other friends and hop on and just have a good chat and discuss that idea. I have a lot of fun of just discussing kind of those hot button topics. That's one that's been around for years and will continue to be around for years. And it is really interesting to look back for posterity. It's kind of like when you're looking at, stock investments or something of that nature. If you want to know who to follow the guy that was right the last 3 times. Follow the lady that gave good advice, before 9/11 and before 2008 and before, presidential switches. Like, were they right at these major changes, or have they always been doom and gloom or rosy outlook? It's really interesting to kind of follow history and make that be your kind of guiding, um, you know, source of information. All right, I'm going to show you 3 cards. I call them cards, items. First one, and this is really where this stemmed from. I was thinking about this, and they're tough sets. The way I collect right now, it's very, very tough sets. So me not being an investor and being a little more of a collector, we're kind of joking the other night, and I have a friend who, doesn't want to pay fair price. He wants to pay 5% less than fair price. He's always finding great deals. He's always finding, like, how'd you find it for that price? And it's just, that's always when he ends up landing. The way I collect, I think some of the things I look at and I say, fair price is X, and I'm willing to go X plus 5%. And more often than not, if you wait long enough, you're going to be at X plus 20%, and your plus 5% is irrelevant, and you're fine. But it's because they're tough items. So the first thing I picked up, I think, is one of the neatest looking M101-2 images. So you've got Tinker, Evers, and Chance. So this is Tinker, famous Cubs infield trio. Their poor third baseman, but I mean, this, when you talk about like double play combinations, Tinker, Evers, Chance is about as good as it gets. So this Tinker image, to me, let me get a little bit closer just so you can get the perspective on it. Kind of like tossing the ball up to hit it. So it's clearly not pitched. It's way up there. It looks like he probably just tossed it up to himself and was, hitting grounders or hitting fly balls. Probably the way he's posed, it looks like he's about to hit a fly ball, maybe for outfield practice, something of that nature. Just stretching out, whatever it may be. But I always love these, the uniforms. M101-2, the Sporting News supplement. So these are all like 1909, 10, 11 kind of range. So really in your T206 era. So love the T206 set, but super, super tiny. A little bit of an artistic impression. This one is issued from October 20th of 1910. So for me to be able to get an actual image of Tinker, had to jump at it. Another set that, I'll be honest, I didn't necessarily know existed until something popped up on a saved search, and I was like, wait, what's this? Maybe, call me silly, but I feel like when I show this, people are like, I didn't know that existed either. It's more Sporting News supplements. When you dive in, you start finding additional opportunities. M101 dash. So there's -1, -2, there's a -6. That's very, super premium. 4 and 5 are the smaller cards. 3, I think, is postcards. So I knew up to 6. And what popped up was an M101-7. So still Sporting News, still a little bit less traditional. This is another supplement too. This one is from December 23rd of 1926. A seller had 4 or 5 of these available and had them for or best offer. As you all know, I do not mind something being ungraded as long as it looks like it's a credible source and all indications are it is 100% authentic. Can't imagine there's a lot of these floating around that would be not real. So I took a jump and added this. I don't believe it's trimmed. Everything about it seems to indicate that it is a just completely legit, real item. This one is, I hope it shows up well enough on camera. There are some pretty healthy creases and tape and all the things on the back, which, again, I don't think this would ever be uh, something that's not an authentic item. But Al Simmons, so you're talking about that 1926 era. I think these came out in 26, maybe, and 27. I don't even know the whole checklist. I've looked online. I assume everything that's out there. There's several players. A lot of them aren't big names. So being a Hall of Fame / star player collector, I wanted to jump at a chance to add an Al Simmons. I prefer him in the White Sox uniform, but early career, he was still ridiculously good. So that's a pretty early career Al Simmons. I think his first postcard comes out in, what was it, maybe 23, 24. So that's a pretty early in item. So I thought the Al Simmons was particularly cool. I did actually win a Rogers Hornsby at auction, which I'm still waiting on coming in. The Hornsby went for some healthy dollars. It was graded a 1.5, and when you look at the population, I assume Hornsbys are going to be mostly graded. If looking at the players that are options, Hornsby is one of the bigger. PSA has graded 6 of them, so I don't know how many float around ungraded. I have not seen these at shows really, so I'm sure there's some folks out there that are maybe better attendees at large shows. Maybe you see these regularly, but I didn't notice them at Strongsville. I haven't come across it much on eBay. In fact, almost never. Even auction houses, I search for players. I always check for Hornsby, and I check for different players of that era, and I don't think I've seen these come across, but another one popped up. Actually, there's one right now for sale, graded. So it's one of the 6. I have another one of the 6. So that means there's 4 more that are unknown who has them. But the same seller that had the Simmons had an ungraded Rogers Hornsby. I sent this to my friends, a small little group chat, mostly because I knew 2 of them were people that might collect Hornsby, and neither one wanted to take a jump. I thought the price that he was asking was very fair, being that I already had one. I wasn't necessarily needing this for my collection, so I went ahead and offered 60% of what he was asking, and he accepted it. So I think I got a pretty reasonable price on this thing. The image, for my take, is fantastic. You do get a little bit of a write-up at the bottom. You do get some information at the top. So to me, that is a fantastic find. And again, very similarly, the back has tape, has some creases, has some imperfection, but I believe the size is true to form. I don't believe it's been trimmed. I think that is as intended. So I'll have to bust out the ruler and verify, but I think that's just a well-loved, well-retained copy. So those are my 3 items, and as I always offer, my few friends that I know are Hornsby collectors, I snagged it because I think the opportunity / price / deal of it was all too good. If they're not interested ever, I'll have 2 in my collection. I'm totally fine with that. If they reached out and said interested, I would just pass it on for what I paid. I never profit on a friend. So just throwing that out there. And sorry for a little bit of the narrative. I know for some folks that's hot button topic, and for other people it's old news. And so I hope my thoughts are at least relevant and maybe things to consider. Definitely up for discussion on that idea of collector investor, because I think we do hot button the term investor as not what a pure collector would be. But I do think all of us collectors have very much an investor mindset and, if not motive, consideration when adding to our collections. So that's it for today. It's my three pickups. They're all big. They're all sporting news supplements of sorts. So maybe that's a new set for a couple of you. So check it out, and I'll catch up with you guys on the next one. Take care.